I grew up in Dallas. I grew up in Preston Hollow, and went to private school, Ursuline Academy, back when they had pre-K through 12. And I had classmates that lived different parts of Dallas, and many of them lived in University Park and Highland Park. And I always enjoyed visiting their homes, the feeling of the community, sidewalks, and was really fascinated with the older homes even at that time in the architecture. Loved Preston Hollow and had a great experience, but just kind of kept it in my mind when I came back to Dallas after college and grad school. Well, as a child, again, visiting, one of my classmates lived in the 3500 block of Caruth, and I just remember the difference that I felt in University Park, for example, was all the kids were playing outside in the front and up and down the sidewalks, and the neighborhood schools, and Preston Hollow, even in the 50s and 60s, was not quite that type of ambiance and feeling. And same with Highland Park. I had a classmate on Arcady and another one on Bordeaux, and it was just always fun visiting them, and just kept it in my mind, as I said, when I moved back as an adult. I think that's the advantage of, I'll use Highland Park as an example, roughly 8,500 citizens in Highland Park in the middle of a big city like Dallas. And with the school district, the parks, the pools, the sidewalks, the 4th of July parade, and having their own mayor and town council, and the same with University Park, allows the community to stay small but still have all the amenities of a major city. As a child, I had an interest in residential real estate, which may sound a little bit unusual, but if my parents were still living, they would confirm my story. But I used to ask my parents to stop at open houses on Sundays after church, and I would buy or have asked my mother to buy home-related magazines, and I would cut out floor plans and just different pictures, and I kept them all in a box, which I still have. So it's always been in the back of my mind, and I've always enjoyed just the whole concept of house. And college and graduate school took me in a different direction. So was in corporate America for about 15 years, but never gave up on the idea of pursuing real estate, which I did get my real estate license in the early 80s while still employed in with a large company here in Dallas. I was in the restaurant industry. I was in operations for a long time, running restaurants and opening restaurants around the country, and then moved into human resources. And my last 10 years was as head of human resources for the Chili's restaurant chain, which became Brinker International. I did all the hiring and training and relocation and whatnot, and all of that experience has carried over into supporting my interest in real estate. But I was wearing two hats for a little while, getting my real estate license while I was with Brinker, and kind of poising myself for the right moment to make the change. Because when you move into real estate, you're starting cold, yes. And no one thought of me as a realtor. They thought of me as being in the restaurant industry. So it was a matter of sort of changing what I was known for. And I had already started buying and renovating older homes. So there was a little bit of a natural move to that, but you really just start, ground floor, holding houses open for other realtors. Back in the days when we did phone duty before MLS online and, you know, virtual tours and whatnot, we had to do phone duty answering the phones in the office and literally just start at the ground and move up. Probably the major difference is in Frisco, for example, most of the product, the homes, are newer. They're more similar age, so let's say everything is 10 years old or less for the most part. So comparing values, you know, is a much more straightforward process. You don't have the variations between land value versus age of home versus degree of renovation, remodel, update, because everything's close to the same age. And other than maybe changing the paint color. And then same with Plano, but now as Plano has gotten older, you know, they're dealing with more similar challenges than that Preston Hollow and North Dallas and the Park Cities, Oak Cliff, Lakewood deal with. And that's, you know, renovating rather than just walking into a new home. Well, the strengths, certainly it's nice to start with positives. The strengths are location. It's very unusual to have a highly desirable neighborhood so close to your downtown area. Most cities, Chicago as an example, you take a train and go to Lake Forest to a similar neighborhood. So we have the advantage of location. Having a premier school district is always there, and solidifies the real estate values as well as, you know, is a draw for people. And the fact that we are landlocked, we don't have a new spot, a new subdivision, a new area to develop or expand. And so there is always kind of a supply and demand situation. And I think the history of the, you know, local government and governance and the parks and the pools and just all of the things that time has allowed to fine tune. Well, the challenge has always been the older structure, and you know, as time progresses, we all live differently. Many of us in the 30s, 40s, and 50s shared one or two bathrooms and one telephone, and now, you know, people want bathrooms for every bedroom and media rooms and game rooms and workout facilities, and those are all wonderful things, but an older home doesn't have it inherently. And so the challenges are to have the vision to be able to transform an older home to meet today's needs. There were two preservation groups in the Park Cities, and one was, well, it was Preservation Park Cities, oddly enough, where we are today, and Park Cities Historic, I believe. I can't remember the two different ones. And one was around before the other, and I started with the newer one in 2000, I believe. And it became clear that we would be more effective working together. One group, the older group, was more fine-tune historic preservation, the state guidelines, national guidelines, markings of the houses. The other group was doing the home tour, community meetings, and anyway, so we spent several years meeting together, and we survived our meetings together and merged to become P-Chips. And the reason the name was so long is because neither group wanted to give their name completely up. So I have always loved history. I enjoy reading about someone's genealogy, even if I don't have any idea who they are. I just find it fascinating. So I love history, and that was just a natural progression to preservation. But I did become more captivated with it when I went to college in New Orleans at Sophie Newcomb Tulane University and stayed for graduate school. So I was there for about 6 years and just found, I mean, I was just hooked, totally fascinated with the respect for the history and the past, but still an eye for the future. Dallas, one of the great things about Dallas, and why actually my parents came here in the very early 50s after my dad finished medical school, um, was even then Dallas was just a can-do, positive attitude, progressive place. And that's a great thing. The challenge for preservation, whether it's a fabulous building downtown or Ross Avenue, Oak Cliff, Lakewood, Park Cities, etc., is that it can stand in the way of progress. And that's the number one challenge. It is just not the same as Charleston, New Orleans, etc. It's a challenge. And what I can have continued to hear the times I've gone to the town of Highland Park presenting recommendations, which I've done many times since the 80s, is property rights. The quick answer or the quick response is no one will agree to that here. We would have an uprising. It's property rights. And I think there's a little bit of confusion between what people perceive as preservation and property rights. And that's a huge challenge because most people are told that it costs more to renovate, that it will be more efficient, less expensive to scrape and start over. And I have not found that yet to be the case. There are some people that like old houses, and so it's important to try and match that person with a great old house. But the other part of it is helping someone kind of have the confidence and understanding of how to take an older home and give it all of the amenities that newer construction has. And that is a challenge. What makes Park Cities special?
Yeah.
Home for people. Again, it's the ambiance. It's a unique community certainly within the city of Dallas and the state of Texas. There's really nothing exactly like it, with the police, fire, city services, parks with fresh flowers seasonally, beautiful swimming pools for each community, the retail, restaurant, certainly the schools. The first thing I do in real estate, if someone's moving here from another city or another state, is, I just tell them day one is going to be a tour. And we drive, and I don't just stay within the Park Cities, because not everyone is looking in the Park Cities, but assuming it is someone wanting Preston Hollow or Park Cities, then I do focus on all of the neighborhood amenities and the proximity to the Arts District and Fair Park and the zoo, the tollway. Easy. We'll drive by all the schools, and I always tell people, even if you don't have children or you don't plan to use the schools are an inherent part of the Park Cities experience and lifestyle. and it relates to our property value, so you need to know about them. Schools, Highland Park Village, Snyder Plaza, SMU, all the parks, both swimming pools, Town Hall. Highland Park Town Hall is amazing to drive people by, and the creek running through. University Park, City Hall, it's beautiful. Always show them the gazebo at Gore Park. And something else I tell people coming from out of town is that, you know, Dallas moved north, and it almost went east and west, Lakewood, Oak Cliff, and the developers of Highland Park, I think, were just a touch wiser and had a better marketing plan and really took the city north. Mm-hmm. And so you see the progression of the architecture when you start at the, you know, oldest part of Highland Park and you move north. And so you see that the homes in higher elementary, many of them built in the 50s. That question 20 years ago would be easier to respond to. I've always pointed out to people that the architecture is very diverse. We don't, even the original homes, one street does not look like it was all built at the same time. So you have a Tudor next to a Spanish eclectic, next to French, etc. So it's always been that way. And I think the connection between the look of Bradfield, the original Bradfield, versus or to Town Hall, is that was a popular style at the time when both structures were built.
Very good.
And Highland Park Village has the same, you know, the Fouché and Cheek. What makes a historic home valuable?
Is it through, can you value some of the actual craftsmanship that you might not see maybe in modern homes?
I would love for that to be the case. Unfortunately, in today's world, it's not as understood that the craftsmanship is superior just because of the time that they were built. But what makes a home historic is going to be the architectural style, possibly the architect attached to the property, whether it's, you know, Lang and Winchell or Hal Thompson, Fouché and Cheek, Hal Yoakum. That's important. Also, possibly someone who lived there. I was involved with saving the house on Stanford in University Park where Doak Walker grew up, and, you know, now there's a plaque on the sidewalk. So, you know, sometimes it's not the architecture of the house that makes it historic or important. It was an occupant at one time, or something that happened there. But certainly we would like to believe that things like, you know, gorgeous hammered doorknobs and leaded glass with European, you know, colored glass design, plaster walls, plaster moldings, coved corners. Those are all things that should be considered important and to make a home historic. Slate roof, tile roof, Ludwig tile. Well, you know, I can only speak to what I do when I'm with someone showing them a house, or when I was in this home that was built pre-1920. I do point out all of the features and things that I believe make it special, make it important, and make it worthy of keeping and wanting. And that is everything from the quarter sawn hardwood floors to, in this home, for example, 9-foot ceilings, which are very nice. And that's something that appeals to people. Wood windows, solid wood doors, the style of the roof. The home we're in now at 3409 Mockingbird is a Dutch colonial that, again, was built sometime probably between 1915 and 1919. I love them all. I mean, I love Hal Thompson. The homes he built on Swiss Avenue, Highland Park, or University Park, Volk Estates, one on Baltimore. They're everything from Tudor to French to Federal style to neoclassic. He's genius. My own home, most recently of 20 years, is a Fouché and Cheek, English Tudor. Gorgeous. The details just fabulous. So I always like to say I've never met an old house that I didn't want to wrap my arms around, and that's the truth. Starting with, first of all, anything can be repaired, but there are times when a property has not been maintained over an extended period of time, and it really has gone structurally beyond. And a great example is a home that I represented a couple of years ago in Highland Park, and it had was with the original family, beautiful 2-story home, but it had been sitting empty for 13 years with no water, nothing. Grass was cut, and it, it really was beyond. And so a new home is being built there. The good news is the home that's being built there is very much in keeping with the neighborhood. This is in the 4200 block of Arcady, so it's the 100-foot wide lots. So there are times when the best use of the property is new construction. Where I think we have been challenged in both University Park and Highland Park is that we do not have, and I use this term lightly, an architectural review board, not so much to tell people what they can build or what they can't build, but just an oversight to look at the larger picture of our streetscape, so that even if something is new, and even a new style, that it height and setback details are consistent. I mean, you should not be able to drive down a street and have a particular house just jump out at you when you're driving by. And so that has been our challenge. So it's not really, preservation is not just preserving an existing structure, it's preserving the look and feel, and I believe the original intention of the community by the original developers. And that is where I feel we have fallen short. There was an article, some of y'all may remember this, but it was the cover story of D magazine back in, I'm going to say, the late 80s or early 90s. And it was when all the tearing down was really just starting on a larger scale. And it had a picture on the cover, and they had taken parts of like 5 houses that had been built recently and put them all together to look like one house. And I think the title of the article was, "What style is this?" So, but anyway, but that has been our challenge. But I am not a preservationist to the extent that I think every structure should remain. There were, homes that were built after World War II that were built very quickly just because of a housing shortage. and all over the city. And those probably are not, I mean, it'd be good to have some just for the historical value of knowing that, because I do believe that our architecture is really a living museum. It's what we drive by every day. And when you come in a house that's 100 years old, and I love it showing an older house, because young people will say, why is that over there? Or what's that little niche in the wall where the phone was?
Mm-hmm.
and trying to explain why a bedroom had no closets. Because the house I restored on the corner of Mockingbird and Auburndale, it's a Cape Cod that the city had listed as a 1934. And as we were restoring it, I was restoring it, taking sheetrock off the walls that had been added. We found the old shiplap, which clearly meant it was an older home. And I went down to town of Highland Park and did some research in their tax files, and they were paying taxes on it in 1918 with an owner's name. But anyway, the house, there were no closets in the 4 bedrooms upstairs. So we had to creatively build closets in and recreate the ceiling molding and base molding so that it looked consistent, but you couldn't tell. A lot of people would ask the question, why, how could they, where are the closets? Well, and I was involved with 2 houses on Swiss Avenue. So it's not, I am involved outside of the Park Cities as well. And one in particular had a 3rd floor. And the original owner was the Carruth family. So it was very, very fun. But anyway, on the 3rd floor, there was this very steep staircase. And of course, people's feet were smaller 100 years ago, and so the stairs are shorter. But it was like a ballroom on the 3rd floor with a half bath. And again, people were asking, why is there a half bath on the 3rd floor? And why is this huge room? But after dinner, they would go up to the 3rd floor, have all the windows open, and there would be musicians, and they would either listen to the music or dance. And so you had to have a half bath. You had to have a toilet and a sink up on the 3rd floor. And in Highland Park and University Park, it was built around a neighborhood concept, and that's why the sidewalks are there. The lots are not as large. I mean, because you think about it, in 1930, the land, I mean, it's all relative, but it wasn't that expensive even at the time. So the lots could have been larger. And that's a distinction between Preston Hollow. I grew up on a little over an acre, and we had horses in the backyard in Preston Hollow and a trampoline, and it's like everything there. So you could do it all at home in your own backyard, whereas in the Park Cities, there wasn't room for that in the majority of the properties, and so it causes people to come out to the front and with sidewalks to walk on the sidewalks and have more of a community feel. The challenge with the development of homes in the Park Cities is, again, that most people are told or assume and believe that you can't make an older home meet your needs for today, and that newer is better, and that it's more expensive. And if you think about it logically, if you take a structure entirely down, which if you notice, the older homes take a long time to raise. I mean, there are some that have been, takes them 2 weeks to get everything. That's testament to the quality. But that if you're utilizing piers and beams and bricks and framing, even if you're putting in all new windows, all new wiring, all new plumbing, obviously all new bathrooms, kitchens, everything, there are thousands of dollars that you're not spending drilling new piers and framing in again, and I mean, logically, right, it makes sense. But most builders, most contractors don't want to deal with the challenges of renovation. And so as a realtor, I mean, I hear it all the time. If it's my own listing and the buyer brings a contractor or builder, you can hear it. Well, by the time we do that, you'd be better off just blah blah, starting over. And so that is something that, at least with my clients, I can help them through that process, because there are people who can and do work on existing homes and do it beautifully, and it's not more money to do that. As I said, I've done homes in Preston Hollow, Lakewood, Oak Cliff, Swiss, and most people cannot see beyond what they can see when they look at a home. I've even heard people walk into a house. My own client one time walked into a house and all the walls were painted white, it's hardwood floors, but the owner had lots of blue, which blue is lovely, but my client did not care for blue. So the upholstery, drapes, rugs in the bathroom, different things were all blues. And so we walked out and she said, love that house, but I just can't do blue. And I said, okay, we're going to walk back in and we're going to start room by room and tell me anything that's blue that is going to be here for whoever buys this house. And she kind of looked around and she said, well, let's see, white walls, hardwood floors. And I said, the blue things are their personal possessions, And so, but that's just a kind of a whimsical way of saying that most people cannot see beyond what they actually see. And so if they're not able to, they need assistance and support in doing that and saying, you can do this, you can widen this opening, you can raise that, you can put French doors right there, you can take the wall out between the kitchen and the breakfast room and the living area. And what I've found through the years is the best way for me to impact preservation has been to take an endangered house and take it to the next level, so that all those questions and concerns are gone. And you can't guarantee the total future of the house, but you can give it the next life, whether that's 10 more years, 20 more years. But because most people cannot see beyond doing that, or they don't have the confidence because they've never done it to feel like I can make this purchase and I can do this. It's problem solving in a fun, creative way to figure, okay, how am I going to make that work? Because the difference between building and renovating is when you're renovating, you have to deal with the dimensions of the room, the corners, everything. And you have to figure, okay, how can we get everything in here? And, sometimes it takes a while, but when you get there, it's very rewarding and fulfilling. I enjoy the process personally. I tell people it's like golf for some people, or tennis, or music. So I enjoy it, but I really started getting involved when so much tearing down was really starting in the Park Cities. And when you see a fabulous house, a Hal Thompson, or not, but just a classic design house come down, and you might be able to do something about it. As a realtor, I'm able to try to step in, and the first thing I do is try and find a buyer for a house. Yes, that's my business of selling homes, but really primarily if you can find a buyer who wants to do the project, that's a good thing. So that house is saved. So I've been involved with over 100. I was trying to write down all the addresses and go through all my files for the last almost 40 years, but over 100 older homes, just matching people. I've even financially helped support to make it happen. And when I can't find someone for it, I have bought myself. So I've done about 43 homes and sold them. And I'm not a house flipper. And depending on the economy at the time, sometimes there's a good outcome financially and sometimes there's not, but I roll it into the next house anyway and keep the banking separate, and it's not a 501c3, but it it can be. But that's not to say that you lose money renovating homes, but doing it the way I'm doing it, not for myself, but as a side project to save the house, it's a little bit different, financial picture. Well, one of the 43 that I have done, the only reason I know it's 43 is because someone asked me to tell them how many, so I went through and counted. But of those, only 3 have been taken down since. And so and they've sold several times, and it's wonderful. The next owner takes it to the next level, adding, whatever they're adding to it, just making it better and better. But that does say that there is a market and an interest in renovated homes and what they have to offer. Well, our organization has been working towards that. One is through education, and you had asked about that earlier, and I firmly believe we need to provide more education for people potentially interested in the neighborhood. But also, we do have honorary plaques. We recently added the Restoration or Renovation Award, and we've had to kind of loosen our criteria on some of the landmarking. But again, it's just honorary, but it is a way to say thank you for doing that, and it's positive reinforcement. I think any moment. I mean, I don't think there really is a starting time. I think of some of the fabulous homes that were built in the 60s. For example, one that I was involved with recently, the McDermott home. This was one of the top 10. I worked with the buyer for 2 years until we were able to purchase it for them. And I knew their intentions were to restore it beautifully. And so that's not, it's 50 years old, so it's considered historic now, but I think something that was built last year, if it's quality construction and design, I think it starts now.
Yeah.
I really do. And so it's not, historic is not always age, and preservation is not age. Like everything, things cycle, and wait before you tear it down because someone will be interested in it again, because styles do trend. We had Tudors that were being built in the early 90s. That was the style. We had the Georgians in the 80s.
Yeah.
Those are not new styles. Well, actually, I use both of those words very carefully, even in written communication with people and with my clients. If I'm sending a text, I always say, I have a request to show your home at 4:15 tomorrow, because I think house is the structure and home is the personal part of it. So they're the same. An empty house is probably a house while it's empty, or being built, but then it becomes a home. You know, everything we've touched on, and I think the people that gravitate towards the park cities, other than just the schools, because I think there are those that come here just for the schools, and that's wonderful. But the residents who come really wanting to embrace everything that the Park Cities has to offer, and want to consider it home, whether they're from the area or not, is you know, everything we've talked about, as I said, the parks, the pools, the sidewalks, the parades, the local paper, you know, everything that it has to offer. Well, no, I think the main thing is that we need to do better protecting the homes that really truly are historic. And I'll touch a quick example. I had always hoped that Lakeside Drive, for example, could be a Swiss Avenue. Possibly not as strict in terms of what you can and can't do, but I wish we had kept a couple of little spots that are very representative of the early days in particular, and you know, the gracious properties that, you know, and we've had one that just came down on Lakeside that really would have been considered the Grand Dame of Lakeside. The other is, I wish our architectural oversight, as I mentioned earlier, had a little more meat to it without being restrictive, because I am not in favor of that either. And that my way of dealing with preservation in the park cities and in parts of Dallas has just really been trying to do it myself, because I've spent years and years and years along with other individuals presenting proposals to University Park and the town of Highland Park, and not, you know, we haven't been able to make much of an impact on that. So I take pride driving by the properties that are still there, that people are enjoying, and you know, hoping that I've made a difference. But it's not a one-person endeavor. Well, I can understand people not wanting to be told what color they can paint their front door, or being told they can't put a bay window, you know, in their dining room to pick up 3 more feet. I mean, but I do think that we, you know, the Architectural Review Board, if it's new construction, but there are many different building guidelines that other communities have, like Lake Forest, Illinois, again, Savannah, New Orleans, Shaker Heights in Cleveland, Nichols Hills in Oklahoma City. For example, if someone buys a property with the intention to tear it down, they cannot get a demolition permit until their plans are fully approved, they've been submitted, approved, and they're within 30, 60, 90 days of construction. Because what we have here all too often is someone buys a property, mostly for tax reasons, immediately bulldozes the property, then they call their architect, and then they determine they cannot build what they wanted to build. So they either sell the land or it sits, and sometimes these have sold 3 or 4 times. George Dahl, the architect who did Fair Park, all the, you know, eclectic Art Deco buildings. His personal home on the corner of Bordeaux and Douglas sold. The family sold it probably 15 years ago, was never on the market. Someone bought it, immediately bulldozed the house, and then it sat empty. And then about a year later, the sign went up to sell it. Sold, and then it sat empty. And finally, the third owner built on it. But these are the things that we should have in place that are reasonable. The other would be the tax structure. If someone is buying with the intention to tear down and rebuild, then until they get their plan submitted and are ready, you know, there needs to be some sort of tax adjustment that could still be retroactive if they ended up not following through. But it's not attractive for any street or block to have empty lots sitting around. And this is not, I mean, I have so many stories and addresses that are examples of that. I mean, that's certainly not restrictive. The other concern I've had more recently is the trees. We were known, you were asking, what about Park Cities made it different? It's always been the trees. You know, because north of here, we're cotton farming and they cleared the land. And so we've had the beautiful trees. And that brought people here. And for years in real estate, we would even put in the description of a property, heavily treed lot, live oaks, red oaks. And people would, as we did at our home on Lorraine, we actually built the addition around 2 live oaks. So you might wonder why it looks the way it does in the back. But that's because they were valued, it was important. And we have no tree protection in Highland Park. I'm assuming we don't in University Park because trees are being taken down. And I think it's just a travesty. It's important for our health and well-being, but not to mention our extreme heat. It's very nice having some shade, but we do not have any protection for that. You can even drive, and the parkway, which is land that belongs to the town of Highland Park and the city of University Park, owners are taking the trees down in the parkway that don't even belong to them. It's not on their survey, it's not their land. And when I questioned this, I was told that they just don't enforce it. I just took a picture of, well, it's just 3 blocks down, 3 blocks west on Mockingbird, in front of a house that was just torn down on the corner. 2 live oak trees are now 5-foot stumps in the parkway. They're still there. Same thing happened on Douglas between Bordeaux and Lorraine, where a property was Gloria Nakud, longtime resident of Highland Park and an interior designer. It was her home, Hal Thompson, and torn down. The people that bought it bulldozed it, then determined with their architect they couldn't build exactly what they wanted to build, but they had already taken 4 trees out of the parkway, 2 in front and 2 on the Douglas side. And it changed hands 3 times before it's being built right now. And a great example of needing a little architectural review assistance. The house has a brick wall all the way across the front. Yeah. But the fact that the trees were taken off of the parkway, which is town of Highland Park property, and when you drive down Douglas, it is very nice to have it's like St. Charles Avenue in New Orleans. Well, I really believe that we have the Smithsonian Institute because people enjoy and get something out of the past, which takes you to the present, which leads you and guides you to the future. And if we take it all away in Highland Park or University Park, then it's gone forever. We don't have it. Much of the time, when an older home that needs updating or renovating is listed, it's put into MLS by the real estate agent, either at their recommendation or the wishes of the owner, and sometimes a combination, that it'll immediately say value is in the land, house not to be shown, great lot for new construction. And there is one example right now on Beverly Drive that is a beautiful brick 2-story Spanish Italianate design with a red tile, curved tile roof, 9-foot ceilings, plaster walls. It needs updating, but it clearly is structurally sound and a gorgeous house. And that is how it is being marketed today in MLS. It's no showings of the house, value in the land. And certainly if the suggestion is made that that is all that's there, then that is probably what the outcome will be. You know, the other side of presenting that, same price, it's not that one is more than the other, and not that one is easier than the other. Some owners believe, well, I don't want to have to go through the inspection and the repair process. It's really not that painful, but and it's manageable, but is presenting the house and talking, you know, about the positive features, and instead of, you know, jumping over the structure and calling it land.
At that point, they've already written it off.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's, guess what's going to happen? That's exactly what will happen. And anytime I'm talking with a realtor and they tell me, oh, I'm getting ready to list a lot in Highland Park, I'm like, where is this lot? Because there's usually a house on it. And you know, that's a call to action, you know, for me.